You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. No geographical place in the world commands the attention of more people than the Middle East. Three of the world's largest and most influential religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, crystallize in this crucible of the crossroads of culture. In the 20th century, the region of Palestine has become the focus of conflicting nationalistic movements. These conflicts have generated fierce fighting among individuals, between groups of freedom fighters seen as terrorists by their enemies, and between the armies of the region, who have acted on their own and as clients of world powers. After World War I, when Great Britain assumed a protectorate over the area, tens of thousands of Jews, inspired by Zionism and driven by anti-Semitism, streamed into Palestine. The growing Jewish population developed a shadow government and used guerrilla warfare to strengthen its position. On May the 14th, 1948, the Jewish leaders of that movement declared Israel a state, despite U.S. and British opposition. War with the surrounding Arab states soon broke out, resulting in the expulsion of over 700,000 Palestinian Arabs, Muslims and Christians, from Israel. Wars in 1956, 1967, and 1973 deepened the Gulf of hatred while expanding Israeli control over the West Bank and Gaza. Years of negotiation, brokered at different times by the United Nations, the Soviets, and the United States, culminated just 3 months ago in August. The world held its breath as President Barack and Chairman Arafat met with President Clinton at Camp David. For a moment, it seemed that a new, peaceful framework was possible, but in the end, the effort failed. Just weeks later, tensions again erupted into some of the bloodiest conflicts in years. The result has been the death of over 215 people, 90% of whom have been Palestinians, and the undermining of the tenuous hope for peace. The challenge for all of us is to develop a nuanced perspective on the issues and events that propel the Middle East forward. Some of you may have seen the review last Sunday in the New York Times book review of Tom Segev's Jews and Arabs Under the British Mandate. The reviewer gives it high praise for sensitivity, for incorporating multiple perspectives. This morning on Newsmakers, we listen to two voices that often are not heard. In the second part of the program, I will be joined by a person responsible for the administration of the Christian holy sites in the Middle East. We begin, though, with Majid Dabdoub, who was born in Palestine and is now a citizen of the United States in Cincinnati. Mr. Dabdoub is a civil engineer and is active in the local Arab American community. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you very much. Just one correction.
Okay.
I was not born in Palestine. I was born in a refugee camp in Lebanon.
Okay.
My parents actually were forced to leave in 1948. Palestine and to go to Lebanon.
So you're not old enough to have been born
That's right.
in Palestine. You were born in a refugee camp. And how
Yes.
long did you, when did you come to the United States?
I came in 1979.
1979. And
Hi.
what brought you to the United States? What propelled you here?
Well, to go to school, to finish my education. And I came to Ohio University. I finished my degree in civil engineering and then came to Cincinnati. I finished my master's in structural engineering.
And are your parents still alive?
My mother is
Your
alive.
mother is. How does she, where did she live before being expelled and ending up in
She
the
lived in
refugee?
the northern part of what's called Israel right now. She lived in the northern part. Actually, she has a sister now who lives there, and we visited her 4 years ago with my family from here. And my mother, she hasn't seen her sister since 1948. And I usually call my aunt, and then I call my mom and connect them together. And my mom came here back in early 80s, in 86 actually. It was the first time for her to talk to her sister when she came to this country.
When Americans see on our news, either the local news on Channel 12 or one of the other stations, or the national news, what's your evaluation of the quality of the reporting that we're getting out of the Middle East?
Basically, it is one-sided. Really, they are not presenting the other side, the Palestinians. They're always taking the Israeli side. And this is one area where the Arab Americans, who are citizens of this country, they complain about, is the fact the media is controlled by the Israelis. And they don't want the American people to really know the truth.
When you say the media is controlled by the Israelis, what do you mean by that? How does that happen? How do the reports get slanted one way?
Well, the fact is, you don't see reports, for example, doing in-depth investigation of why is this, like, for example, the uprising. Why did it start? What's the reason behind it? They don't go and spend time to listen to the Palestinian side. One area we see, for example, when an Israeli is killed, they say an Israeli soldier was murdered. But when Palestinians are killed, especially children, they report them as killed, or they report the Palestinians as terrorists. And this is one area. I think what the reporters, they need to know is they really need to gain knowledge of what's happening there. Why is it all of a sudden September 28 we have this uprising? What's the reason behind it?
Let me ask that question. From your perspective, why did things suddenly turn so violent at the end of September?
It's not sudden, actually. It's been going on since 1948. The people, the Palestinians, whether Muslims or Christians, and by the way, the Palestinians are Christians and Muslims, whether they live in the Israeli in 1948 or West Bank and Gaza, they've been suffering all these years for the last 52 years. And
even though that has been continuous, though, there certainly is a new outbreak of intensive fighting in the last couple of months.
Yeah, the turning point was actually in 1993 when Chairman Arafat came to the White House and he signed the peace agreement with Israel. And at that time, people in the West Bank and Gaza, the Palestinians, thought that their dream came true. The fact is, yes, we're going to have peace, and we suffered enough. It's about time to have peace, and peace in their mind, it means the fact that the economic situation is going to get better, their economic situation is going to get better. The other fact is their men will not be imprisoned, their houses will not be demolished, the settlements will be stopped in West Bank.
The Jewish settlements in the West Bank.
Yes. For all of these things, their life since 1967, for example, in West Bank and Gaza, it's basically under siege by the Israelis. They've been tortured. For all of this, they thought that this is an opportunity for them to live peaceful life. The children thought of their childhood again, because now they really don't have a childhood. And based on that, they thought, great, peace is going to achieve these things for us. But from 1993 until now, they didn't see any light to that to lead them to believe in peace.
I guess from an Americans who are not deeply involved in the situation, the perspective might be, oh, gee, a lot has changed since 1993, that there have been certain concessions, that there's a Palestinian Authority that has control over significant areas of the West Bank and Gaza. Gee, there has been improvement, would be, I think, the way that it usually gets reported here. You're saying that's not the case?
Well, the improvement, what people were looking for is on ground. What we're talking about, what this peace is all about, I mean, the Palestinians, they keep saying that the Palestinians are not giving in. They are not meeting our conditions. First of all, the whole peace process, it was a mistake to start with, because the Israelis were telling the Palestinians, you have to listen to us. It was not an equal partners, let's say, eye to eye. The Palestinians accepted 20% of the whole land. They accepted what was offered to them. It's 20% of their whole land. And they are willing to accept that. But the issues are the way the Israelis are treating the Palestinians, that you are not even human beings. They dehumanize the Palestinians to a level that it's okay to kill them. I mean, one Israeli on CNN made that clear.
On concrete issues, and those are the big issues, but this last negotiation, going into that negotiation at Camp David, were you hopeful at the beginning of that? I'm asking you personally now. Were you hopeful that that was going to result in some sort of final settlement that would have settled the issue of Jerusalem, would have settled a number of other issues? Were you hopeful when you started that?
Sure. We all, the Palestinians, they are sick and tired of the war. They've been there for 100 years. For them, it was an opportunity to have peace. But what we saw in Camp David here last July, the fact is the major issues, for example, Jerusalem, is a sticky point. The issue with, for example, the holy sites for Muslims and Christians. These are important issues for both the Muslims and the Christians and the Palestinians in general. And the other issue is establishing a Palestinian state. The other issue, which is a major issue also, the right of return for the refugees from 1948 and 1967. For example, my mother, right now my brothers are considered as refugees in Lebanon. What are you going to do with these people? How are you going to solve their problem? Israel said, we will allow up to 100,000 on a humanitarian purpose to go back within 20 years. I mean, come on, let's be realistic here. Think about it. My mother is 70 years old. Probably she could go there, but they will allow her within 20 years. She's not going to live 20 years. But basically what they are saying is those people who left in 1948, by the time comes to go back, they're dead. And then my brother, for example, is not considered in their definition as a refugee, because they define refugee as those people who were forced to leave in 1948.
So if you were born outside
like for example, I have US citizenship. In their mind, I'm not a refugee, but my brothers who still live in a Palestinian camp and they are labeled as refugees, they don't have the right to go back. Then what's going to happen to them? But this issue must be resolved. And the issue of Jerusalem?
The issue of Jerusalem from your perspective, again, I'm asking you to speak personally, not, you're not a representative of any organization. What do you see as the issue? How would you, as a Palestinian, define that issue?
Well, in my mind, the only way in order for us to have peace in the Middle East, just peace with equal rights for both the Palestinians and the Israelis. Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, must go to the Palestinians. West Jerusalem will stay as for the Israelis. But the issue with Al-Aqsa, the holy sites, this must be under the sovereignty of the Palestinians, because it is very important, this holy site. It's very important for
this
the Palestinians.
This is also a holy site for the Israelis and for Christians.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
Any way of internationalizing that site?
In any shape or form, but it cannot be under the Israelis. For the last, since 1967, Israel, it's clear in our mind, they tried to destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque. They tried to destroy the holy site for the Muslims. They prevented the Muslims from, until now, every Friday, they prevent certain age group to go and pray. This is, I can't believe this is it's illegal. Can you imagine if I come here to the United States and tell you if you're under the age of 45, you cannot go to a church on Sunday? What would you do? Now this is what they are saying. If you're under the age of 45 or under the age of 35, you can't go and pray on Friday.
What about the issue of the declaration of a Palestinian state by Chairman Arafat? He has put that off several times. Do you again think that he should just move ahead with that?
Well, the Palestinian state issue, really it's not an issue, because it's a matter of time. It's going to happen. I don't think really this is an issue. It's going to happen. It's better to happen through negotiations. It's better to happen through an agreement. But we need to understand one aspect also from that. Both the Palestinians and the Israelis, they need each other. They work together. They're neighbors. You know, you have 120,000 Palestinians, they go and work in Israel every day. But they need to work together. They tried the war. The only thing that's going to work right now is really peace.
Okay. I'm very aware of time. We have just a little bit left. If Americans want to get a better understanding, a more complex understanding of what's going on there, what's the best source of information for them?
Well, there are, I mean, the internet, it's widely open. You could go to the internet. You could go to CNN, for example. And from the CNN, you could link to other sites. Basically, the internet is available.
CNN seems to have taken a more broad-based approach, I have to say, than the networks, and that might be something that our viewers could hear. Thank you very much. We're out of time this morning, but thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you very much.
Stay tuned. After the break, I'll be joined by someone with another perspective on Mideast issues, a resident of Jerusalem responsible for the Christians and Christian holy sites in the area. In recent years, the issues of the Middle East seem to revolve around Jewish-Muslim dynamic. But that formulation ignores another important group of people who are vitally interested in this area, Christians. As the birthplace of Christianity, the Middle East is home for many Christians and the destination of millions of Christian pilgrims each year. The status of Christians, however, has not only been ignored by most reporters, but marginalized in the region itself. This morning, I am joined by Father Peter Vasko. Father Vasko is a Franciscan friar and the president of the Holy Land Foundation, an organization that works to inform and educate the general public about the plight of Christians in the Holy Land. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
You are a Native American, but you now live in Jerusalem, is that correct?
Yes, I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and been in the Holy Land now the last 15 years, and serve on the governing board of the Franciscans, whose history goes back 800 years in serving the Christian population. It's been a joy in many ways, but also a sorrow, because as an American, we know that we have been at peace for so many years, and to go into a region that has developed so many conflicts, beginning when I started in 1985, we had, in 86 we had the Intifada, and then there was the Gulf War, the concern there, and now we have these tensions back and forth, but with some also positive vibrations of the Oslo Peace Accords. So it's been a real interesting mix.
How many Christians, in the state of Israel right now, how many Christians live in the state of Israel?
Well, I think to preface that, I think it's important that we speak about the state of Israel, including the territories, that includes the West Bank and Gaza, because most Americans look at Israel as a complete whole, whereas Israelis look at it as their country, part of their Israeli proper. But combining those three combinations, there are only 160,000 Christians out of 7.6 million people. 50 years ago, the country of Israel had a population of 25% of them were Christians. Today, that percentage has dropped to 3%.
Is that drop because of an absolute drop in the number of Christians, or just the growth of the Jewish population?
It's a combination of several factors. One, like you just so stated, is the birth rate. The birth rate for the Jewish people, the Jewish faithful, of the Muslim faithful has increased tremendously. The average birth rate for Christian Palestinians has been maybe 2 or 3%, very, very little. But there has also been some other factors. It's been economic factors and political factors. Economically speaking, right now the average Israeli salary is between $24,000 and $26,000 a year. The average Palestinian salary, where we're speaking about Christians and or Muslims, is between $6,000 and $7,000 a year. The money coming in for foreign aid, both to the PNA, which is Arafat's government, and the Israeli government, has been tremendous, but none of that money ever trickles down to the Christian Palestinians. So they sort of feel caught in the middle, and they are the ones who are saying, who's going to help us? Obviously, if you're Muslim, Palestinian, there's 3 million Muslim Palestinians in that country. So they help their people, etc. And the Israelis, who have 4.6, they help their people. But there's very little being done for the Christians, and they sort of feel left out, and they're between, you know, a minority within a minority between the two factions.
You know, those of us who live in the United States, who have grown up in the United States, live in a very rarefied world where we have this concept of equal rights of religions and the First Amendment, and it's just not the way it is in most of the world. What is the official status of the Christians from the Israeli government's point of view, or from the Palestinian Authority's point of view?
Well, I can quote Uri Moore, who's also a dear friend of mine, who's also the head of Director of Christian Communities in Jerusalem. He said that obviously Palestinians are Palestinians, and whether they're Christians or Muslims, there's no differentiation for the Israeli government as an official stance. Obviously, this causes some problems because when there is difficulties, the majority of the people who are in conflict are with the Muslim Palestinians. But during 1986, during the Intifada, the Christians did participate because it was a national uprising. But majority in this particular conflict that's happening now, the majority of our Christians are staying out of it. Not that they're not frustrated with perhaps maybe external policies, official policies of the Israeli government, but they're affected by that, and but they have not really participated in any great extent to the conflicts you've seen in the last 2 weeks on TV.
You know, back in July, and I want to say here, we're taping this in late October. We don't know exactly when this is going to run, so we're referring to the current troubles.
Right.
Back in July at the Camp David conference, there was a great deal of hope, especially for people outside the region, maybe for inside, that's what I'm getting to, for some sort of peace settlement. Didn't happen, but can it happen? Is that a realistic hope?
I think you have to qualify the criteria for hope. When you speak about Jerusalem, that is a thorn in the side for both parties, because Israel, of course, their ancestry goes all the way back to Abraham's time. They have a very, very special interest in that land. And Jerusalem is the eternal city. It is the eternal city for the three monotheistic religions, but obviously it's the two groups, the Islamic and the Jewish faith, who have basically control of that. I will say that all these many years, the Israeli government has been very open towards the Christians, has protected more or less for the most part the holy sites of Christendom. There's been no problems. The only problem is if you came as a pilgrim to the Holy Land on pilgrimage, you can move anywhere you want to move to. But if you're a Christian and you happen to be a Palestinian, you don't have that mobility. And this is the concern we're talking about. Natural human rights, the universal rights of mobility, of going to work, of having an education, etc. And unfortunately, in the past, although this has not happened in the last 4 or 5 years, but there was the closure of the territories, and that proved havoc on the Palestinian people.
You know, I'm very aware of our time situation, so we have about less than a minute here. What is it that the Holy Land Foundation is trying to do concretely? Give some examples.
I think what the Holy Land Foundation is attempting to do is to provide motivation and incentives through various programs and projects for our Christians in the Holy Land to remain, through education, through scholarship grants in the region, to getting jobs for them in the West Bank, and lastly to provide housing for them.
Okay. Thank you very much for being here. Good luck with your work, and we'll be watching your part of the world very closely, obviously.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Okay. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the women and the men who are shaping our region for the future. Have a good week.